Day 3 is all about the preservatives. This is a very big group, so this is going to be split over 2 days. We'll be looking at 3 today and tomorrow the next. So, remember that we have a numbering system, and here is the numbering system again. When we talk about anything starting with the number 2, we are talking about preservatives. There are different groups of preservatives, however, which is what we need to break them up into the ones that have similar actions. So the first group are the sorbates. These are the numbers that run between 200 and 203, so just a very short range of numbers. We have sorbic acid and potassium sorbate, which are the names that they may be described as on your ingredients list, and they are used in a number of foods that will call themselves natural. This is the problem. Remember that food additives are not in our junk food anymore or our takeaway foods. They are in normal, everyday, healthy foods and natural foods as well. Now, admittedly, sorbates do occur naturally in some fruits, but when we're talking about them as an additive and for commercial use, they are manufactured synthetically. So it is very misleading, as some manufacturers do, to describe them as a natural preservative. So how will you know if they are causing a problem for you? You will have the full range of food intolerance reactions going back from day 1, including irritable bowel symptoms. So that may be needing to quickly run to the bathroom to go to the toilet, and there may be some pain and cramping and bloating and gas involved with that as well. It can be swinging between diarrhea and constipation, or just full-on constipation. The additive sorbates can also cause children's behaviour problems. Bit of a strong trigger behind asthma and eczema and contact dermatitis. Can cause eye irritation, can cause nasal irritation, and can even cause that irritated feeling in the mouth and be classified as burning mouth syndrome. So where are we going to find them? Sadly, in a lot of places. We'll have them in flatbreads and tortillas, so Old El Paso uses them for example. They're in a lot of bakery products such as cakes and pikelets and pancakes and waffles, so these are all your prepared foods that you get in the supermarket. Yogurts will also have them, so yogurts are not really a healthy food anymore. We've already got colours and flavours in there, and now we've got sorbates as well. You'll also find them in fruit syrups or things like preserved figs, preserved cherries as well. And flour products such as fresh pasta and noodles will also make use of this particular preservative. We have bread and bread products such as English muffins, cheeses such as cream cheese, cottage cheese, cheese slices, cheese sticks, and reduced fat cheeses and breads. The pictures that you'll have through the videos are all actual brands that are available in your supermarket, and these brands do actually have the preservatives and additives that we are talking about. You'll find the preservative in drinks such as fruit juices, cordial, brewed soft drinks and wine. And it's quite sad that a brand such as Daily Juice, that gives the impression that it's very natural and very fresh, is making use of this particular preservative. You'll also find the preservatives in margarine, spreads and dips. What makes this particular preservative an annoying and frustrating one is that if you do have a reaction to it, it's not going to be just in your foods, but you'll also find it in your medicines. So it can be found in many tablets, syrups, eye, ear and nose drops, contact lens solutions, lotions and cosmetics. So you can appreciate why some of the symptoms associated with this are involved with irritations of the eye, nose and mouth. They can also be just generalized dermatitis as well, or the localized irritation to the eye, nose and mouth due to the application of these particular products. The next group of preservatives to look at today are the benzoates. These are the numbers 210, 211, 212 and 213. Way back in 2007, the University of Sheffield did some studies on benzoates and found some concerning results on them based on animal studies. They found that this particular preservative caused damage at the DNA level of the cell. Now, that's a very serious finding to have. If you play around with the DNA level of the cell, you're playing around with the cell's ability to replicate itself correctly and properly, and to have a healthy, strong, viable cell being created. If you play around with the DNA, you're playing around with the entire structure of that cell and its performance, and you have that widespread influence on a human's body. So although the study concluded that it wasn't determined what that meant for humans, I personally would rather that my children weren't having this when they are at a particularly rapid rate of reproducing their cells all the time. So where are we going to find these preservatives? Very similar to the sorbates. A lot of cordials and soft drinks are going to use the benzoates. However, it's not very consistent even within one brand as to where you are going to find it. For example, Schweppes lemonade in the bottle will have the preservative, but if you buy Schweppes lemonade in the can does not. You must always read the label, even if you are familiar with something and buy it all the time and know it to be additive free or additive safe or additive friendly, because manufacturers, without warning and without any change on the label, can completely do a backflip and either bring in a preservative that they didn't used to use, or the opposite, actually suddenly become more user-friendly and more additive-free. So always check the label and don't assume that from year to year the same brand is going to be appropriate for you. You'll also find the preservative in flavoured waters. You have one brand's example there, sports drinks and juices. Like the sorbates, the benzoates are also going to be found quite widespread in medications. What's really alarming is that because this particular preservative can trigger airways irritation, therefore asthma and hay fever, and also cause irritation to the skin, it is alarming that a lot of children's medications contain it. The benzoate preservatives will have a slightly different name. They will be termed as the hydroxybenzoates or the parabens, and there are a few additional numbers to be aware of when they're being used. You may have the food-based benzoate preservatives being used, so the numbers that you're familiar with, or they may be using these particular ones here. So we have 216, propylparaben or propyl p-hydroxybenzoate, which is only meant to be allowed to be used in food colours, but it's sneaking through into medications. The same for 218, methylparaben, or it may be written as methyl p-hydroxybenzoate. As long as you see the word benzoate in there, you know it's going to be part of the family of benzoate preservatives, and if your child has a problem with it or you have a problem with it and react to it, you need to avoid it in the medications as much as you possibly can. Because the thing is that the benzoates are very widely used in asthma medications, and this is the terrible irony. You're using the medications to bring relief or as a preventative to your child, and yet that very same medication can actually be exacerbating or allowing the asthma problem to get worse and to remain in the child. Whereas if you didn't have that preservative, the incidence and the frequency and the severity of the asthma episodes would probably dramatically decrease. The benzoates are well known to cause terrible behavioural effects too. So a lot of families will report that their child is doing really well on an additive-free diet. They have an episode where they needed some medication, and they found that their child suddenly became this screaming monster, or this restless child, this cranky child, this angry child, or a child who can't sleep. So massive effects on behaviour, particularly in children. The next group of preservatives, the twos again, are the sulfites. We have a very long list of numbers and names to be aware of. The numbers range between 220 to 228. Sulfites have a long history of being associated with childhood asthma. The sulfites are known to affect up to 65% of young Australian asthmatics, and this was information that was known all the way back in 1984. Yet today, 25% of parents of asthmatic children still don't know about this connection, even though the knowledge has been out there for a couple of decades now. So how do the sulfites cause a problem with asthma? It's not an obvious reaction. So your child doesn't eat something with sulfates as a preservative in it and have an episode. But what it does is it just constantly keeps the airways irritated. So then when your child is exposed to a known asthma trigger, which may be cold air or exercise or a virus over the next few days, you assume it is the trigger that led to the asthma episode. But the additive made your child more vulnerable to that trigger, whereas ordinarily they would be able to cope with that trigger a lot better than what you would expect if they didn't have the sulfite there. So where do we find the sulfites? Unfortunately, these are predominantly not a labelled preservative, and that is mainly because you're going to find the sulfites very heavily used in dried fruit. Dried fruit have the highest level at approximately 3,000 milligrams per kilo of weight of the fruit, particularly apricots. Apricots are quite deadly for being coated and drowned in the sulfites. Now, this is despite that the minimum amount that should be allowed to be used to preserve a dried fruit should only be about 10 milligrams per kilo. So dried fruit and especially apricots are just literally swimming in this particular additive. So you are not necessarily eating fruit, you are actually just eating a whole heap of chemicals. Cutting out the sulfites and the benzoates and potentially also the sorbates can significantly reduce the need for a person to have a puffer. You will find the additive as mentioned in dried fruits, but also in fruit drinks, also in cordial, also in sausages and mince. Now, it is actually illegal to use the sulfites in mince, but it is still being found in some supermarkets and sometimes butchers as well, because the sulfites helps to make the meat stay more fresh, which is why it's illegal to use it, because you can palm off old meat and sell it because it still has the appearance of looking fresh. You'll also find it in shop produced fruit salads, and again it probably won't be labelled, so you won't know that you're getting it. So what are we going to do? Unfortunately, there's not too many options. The main option is to avoid anything with dried fruits. So rather than using dried fruits or having products with dried fruits in them, focus on your fresh fruits as a snack or being added to your cooking and to your meals. So this means that you may have to avoid a lot of fruit drinks, muesli bars, because most muesli bars are going to be using dried fruit. Cereals, many brands of cereals will have dried fruits in there, and you have the impression that that makes them healthier. Fruit flavoured breakfast and any kind of biscuits that are styled like a muesli bar or call themselves healthy are more likely to use the dried fruits, which gives the impression that it's kind of healthy because it's got fruit in there and it's going to be loaded with the sulfites again. And that's the end of today's lesson, and we'll continue with some more preservatives tomorrow.